the young widow who turned her grief into power. The morning sun barely touched the rooftops of Luero village. Smoke rose from cooking fires and the scent of roasted maize drifted through narrow earthen paths. Birds sang in the distance as if unaware of the sorrow that hung over Amina's small compound. She had lost her husband Cato just 3 days ago to a sudden fever that no medicine could touch. The grief pressed on her chest like a heavy stone, yet she kept moving, tending to the small garden Cato had once loved. Villagers whispered as they passed. They pitied her, and some plotted. In Luero, a widow was expected to fade into silence. Amina's relatives arrived unannounced the morning after Cato's funeral. They were loud, demanding, and certain that they would claim parts of the small land and the little money Cato had left behind. Amina stood by the doorway, her hands clenched so tight that her knuckles whitened. Her aunt, Mama Jalia, spoke first. She said Amina could not continue living in the compound alone. It belonged to the family. Her uncle added that Cato had no will, and therefore everything should go to the eldest male cousin. Amina listened quietly. She could feel her body trembling, but she refused to cry in front of them. Instead, she nodded as if agreeing, while a storm built inside her. She thought of her children, of her late husband's dream to grow small businesses in the village, of the dignity he had left her. She knew she could not surrender to the greed that surrounded her. That night, she sat under the fading glow of the lantern and remembered how Cato had laughed when he first showed her the recipe for the homemade soap he had once made as a boy. He had spoken of scents and colors, of selling to the neighbors to earn a little extra money. She realized she had something he had left behind, something practical. By the next morning, she gathered what little she had: a small clay pot, some ashes, a few herbs, and leftover cooking oil. She went to the river to fetch clean water and began mixing the ingredients as Cato had taught her. The village children watched curiously. Some called her mad for trying to make soap in her grief. Others whispered words of admiration. Amina worked for hours, her fingers stiff from the cold water, her eyes red from sleep and tears, but she kept going. By late afternoon, a small batch of soap sat on the drying racks. The smell of coconut and wildflowers drifted into the village square. That evening, she walked to the market with a single bundle and nervously offered it to Mama Nindi, the market elder. Mama Nindi was skeptical at first, but agreed to sell the soap for her. By sunset, Amina had earned a few coins, enough to buy a small bag of flour and some maize. It was not much, but it was a start. Her relatives returned the next day. They found her counting coins on the wooden bench outside the compound. Their eyes widened with disbelief. Amina looked up at them calmly. She spoke for the first time with a quiet but firm voice. She said that she would not give up her husband's property. She would work and make a living on her own. They scoffed, calling her foolish, warning her that she would fail. Yet Amina's resolve only grew. That night she stayed awake late, mixing larger batches, trying new scents and testing shapes. Each soap bar carried a memory of Cato. Each smell reminded her of his laugh, each color a spark of hope. Word spread slowly at first. One neighbor bought a bar, then another, and soon women in the village came to see the young widow who dared to work in the open while under so much pressure. Some offered advice, others borrowed a small piece of clay or leftover herbs to try themselves. Amina learned quickly. She experimented with bright colors, soft textures, and subtle fragrances. The market began to fill with the aroma of her creations. The whispers of pity transformed into murmurs of admiration. By the end of the first month, she had sold enough soap to buy a small tin roof for the storage shed she built herself. Her relatives were furious. They began visiting more frequently, demanding accounts, trying to intimidate her with rumors and threats. Yet each time they came, Amina met them with quiet eyes and calm words. She refused to fight with anger. Instead, she let her work speak. One evening, as the sky blushed pink and orange, a wealthy trader from the neighboring village came to see her. He had heard about the young widow who was making the most fragrant soaps in the region. He offered to buy a large quantity to sell in the town center. Amina hesitated. She knew that accepting would mean more money, but also more scrutiny. Her relatives would not take it lightly. She nodded carefully and agreed. The first delivery went smoothly, and the coins she received seemed heavier in her palm than anything she had held before. She felt a strange combination of relief and excitement. That night, she shared her first feast with her children, a small but hearty meal of maize porridge and dried fish. They laughed together for the first time since Cato's death. It felt as if the village itself had noticed her strength, but not everyone was pleased. Mama Jalia and the uncles continued plotting. One night, Amina overheard them speaking near the compound wall. They planned to seize her soap, to destroy her small success. Amina's heart pounded, but she stayed silent. She knew she had to be clever. She could not let anger guide her now. She had built something fragile but beautiful, and every ounce of her effort had meaning. That night, she hid the remaining soaps in a secret shed, locking it with a key she had sewn into the hem of her dress. As she returned to her children, she whispered to herself that this was only the beginning. The next morning, she discovered a shocking sight. Someone had set fire to the corner of the market where she kept her display. Smoke rose into the sky and villagers ran to see. Amina's heart sank. Her work, her hope, her small victories were engulfed in flames. She ran to the ashes, eyes wide with disbelief, searching for anything that could be saved. Then she saw it, one small bar untouched by the fire, lying near a stone. She picked it up, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "This is not the end." Right after that shocking moment, Amina held the single unburned soap in her hands as smoke curled around her feet. Villagers stood at a distance, unsure whether to help or watch. Mama Nindi pushed through the crowd, her face stern but kind. She said that misfortune did not mean defeat. She reminded Amina that the fire could not take her skill, her heart, or her determination. Amina nodded silently and looked around. The ashes smelled of charred wood and melted oils, but she saw possibilities in that ruin. That night, she slept little, thinking of new ways to protect her work and expand. She remembered a story Cato had once told her about traveling traders who carried goods from village to village. If she could reach them, she could sell more than the market offered and keep her business safe from local envy. The next day brought an unexpected twist. While collecting herbs near the river, Amina met a young man named Jabari. He was from a neighboring village and had heard about the widow, whose soaps were famous even beyond Luero. Jabari offered to help her deliver products to the traders in the town center. At first, Amina hesitated. She did not know him and trusted few since her husband's death. But she sensed honesty in his eyes and agreed to let him assist her, beginning cautiously with a few bars wrapped in cloth. Over the next week, Jabari returned with coins and news. Traders were delighted by the colors and fragrances and requested larger quantities. Word spread rapidly to the town center that a widow from Luero had created something remarkable. Amina's small shed, once quiet and hidden, became a hub of activity. Children ran errands, carrying soaps to Jabari, and women came to watch and learn. Amina found herself teaching them new techniques, showing how to mix oils with ashes, how to pour slowly to avoid cracks, and how to scent the bars naturally with herbs. Her grief slowly transformed into purpose, but with growing success came more resistance. A group of relatives led by Mama Jalia stormed the compound one afternoon, shouting and demanding that Amina hand over the profits. "This is not your business," Mama Jalia barked. "Your husband is gone. The land and everything on it belongs to the family." Amina faced them with calm eyes. She explained that the money came from her work and skill, not from inheritance. "I am not asking for charity," she said quietly. "I am not taking from anyone. I am building with my hands." The relatives were furious, but the villagers, who had begun admiring Amina's determination, surrounded her and murmured their support. Some even threatened to report any violence to the village chief. Mama Jalia left fuming but cautious. The seeds of respect were sprouting where once there had been pity. By the end of the month, Amina's business had grown beyond her imagination. She employed other widows, teaching them the craft of soap making. Some women came timidly at first, uncertain of their abilities, but under Amina's guidance, they discovered skill and confidence. Together, they experimented with different oils, natural dyes from flowers and roots, and fragrances from the forest. Soon, the soap became not just a product but a symbol of resilience. Villagers began referring to Amina's compound as the House of Hope. Mothers brought daughters to learn. Children marveled at the rainbow of soaps drying in the sun. Amina could feel Cato's presence in the work, guiding her, laughing softly in her memories. Then came a twist she had not expected. One morning, a government official visited the village. He had heard rumors of the widow who was transforming her grief into a thriving business. He inquired about her operation, asking how she had managed to grow so quickly and sustainably. Amina explained simply, detailing her techniques, her reliance on natural ingredients, and the collaborative effort with other women. The official nodded thoughtfully and left with a promise to inform nearby villages about her work. That evening, Amina felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Exposure meant more opportunity, but also more scrutiny. She wondered if her relatives would escalate their efforts now that others were taking notice. By nightfall, everything had changed. Traders from distant villages arrived, offering to buy larger quantities than Amina could supply. She realized that if she scaled too quickly without proper planning, her products could falter. That night, she stayed awake, planning schedules, sourcing more herbs, and considering a rudimentary inventory system. The villagers who had grown fond of her helped set up drying racks and storage shelves. Amina marveled at the sense of community she was creating. The grief that had once paralyzed her had given way to a network of support, commerce, and hope. Yet danger lingered. Amina discovered late one evening that her secret shed had been tampered with. Someone had tried to break in, but the lock she had sewn into her hem had held firm. She realized the relatives had escalated their plans. The thought of losing everything terrified her, but she refused to yield. She called a meeting with the other widows, and they decided to take turns guarding the compound and transporting soap discreetly. Amina felt a rush of determination. She would not let fear control her life. She would fight not with anger, but with strategy, patience, and skill. Just as she was preparing the next batch of soap, a commotion arose outside. Villagers rushed toward the compound yelling warnings. Amina ran to the gate and saw a group of strangers approaching, carrying large sacks. They were outsiders, but the sight sent a chill down her spine. Jabari ran beside her, whispering that they looked like bandits rather than traders. The strangers advanced, their intentions unclear. Amina's heart pounded. She grabbed a stick and stood between the compound and the intruders, ready to defend everything she had built. One of the strangers raised a hand and shouted something in a language she did not understand. Suddenly, a woman stepped forward from the crowd, pointing toward the intruders and shouting warnings. The villagers formed a protective circle around Amina and the other women. The tension was unbearable. Amina took a deep breath and prepared to face the unknown. The strangers moved closer, and in that moment, she realized that all the effort, all the pain, and all the hope of the past months led to this confrontation. She had to protect the House of Hope or risk losing everything. Her hands shook, but her voice remained steady as she shouted for calm, ready to turn fear into courage. By the time the strangers reached the compound gate, the villagers had formed a tight line. Amina stepped forward, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, her eyes scanning the group for threats. Jabari was beside her, holding a bundle of soaps, ready to protect what he could. The strangers halted and one of them spoke in a rough voice, demanding the soaps and the herbs. Amina's heart raced, but she stood firm. "These are my goods," she said quietly. "I will not hand them over to those who come with threats. Leave now." The leader of the group sneered, stepping closer. The air was thick with tension, the forest around the village silent as if it too were watching. Suddenly, one of the village elders shouted and threw a small stone near the intruder's feet. The sound startled them, and in that instant, Amina seized her courage. She shouted for the women to bring forward buckets of water and the children to fetch sticks. The intruders hesitated, unsure of the unexpected resistance. The villagers' courage inspired Amina. She knew that her strength came not only from skill but from the community she had built. The intruders realized that intimidation would not work. They began retreating slowly, grumbling and muttering threats, but the villagers held their ground until they disappeared into the dust and shadows. Amina's heart pounded. She surveyed her compound, relieved that nothing had been stolen this time. Jabari clapped her on the shoulder and said that she had turned fear into power. Amina smiled faintly, realizing that months of loss, grief, and hard work had led her to this moment. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The next week brought more unexpected changes. Traders and buyers arrived with letters from the neighboring towns praising the quality of her soap. They offered larger contracts and even suggested new scents and variations. Amina embraced the opportunity. She worked with other widows, expanding production and teaching them not only the craft, but also how to manage orders, handle money, and negotiate. Each widow who joined learned not only to earn a living, but to reclaim her own dignity and strength. Slowly, the House of Hope became a symbol for widows across the region. Women came from distant villages, carrying small gifts or helping hands, hoping to learn the secret of her resilience. Amina welcomed them all. She felt Cato's presence in every lesson she taught, in every smile she inspired, and in every bar of soap she pressed. But with success came jealousy. Mama Jalia and her allies refused to give up. One afternoon, while Amina was instructing a new widow on mixing oils, they arrived at the compound with a village official. They claimed that Amina was overstepping her rights and violating customs by working without male oversight. The official, unfamiliar with the details, demanded to see her business records. Amina calmly produced her notes, showing how each transaction had been accounted for and how the women she employed were paid fairly. The official examined the ledger and nodded slowly. Mama Jalia's face twisted with frustration as she realized that Amina's honesty and diligence had turned what they saw as a vulnerability into proof of legitimacy. That evening, whispers of admiration filled the village. A widow had not only defended her rights, but had earned the respect of officials. Amina's success also began changing the hearts of the villagers. Where once pity had lingered, now there was respect. Mothers began encouraging daughters to learn soap making. Young men offered assistance with deliveries and sourcing herbs. Even the children who had once whispered and stared now carried water for the mixing pots and helped sort drying bars. Amina felt a sense of pride she had not thought possible when grief had weighed her down. She had created a network of trust and collaboration. Each success was a small rebellion against the expectations that had tried to cage her. Then one evening, a messenger arrived with a letter sealed in wax. It was from the town council in the district capital. They had heard of her remarkable story and invited her to participate in a trade fair showcasing local crafts and entrepreneurship. Amina was overwhelmed. Traveling beyond the village had never seemed possible. She hesitated, wondering how her community would manage without her. Jabari and the widows assured her that they could continue the work and urged her to go. The night before the journey, Amina walked through the compound, touching each drying soap, remembering Cato, and whispering promises of returning. She realized that the world beyond Luero awaited, and that her grief had forged the courage to take this next step. The day of departure arrived. Amina carried a small bundle of soaps with her and left with Jabari guiding the way. Villagers lined the road to see her off, shouting blessings and prayers. She felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. The path to the town fair was long and the journey unfamiliar. Yet Amina's mind was clear. She envisioned her small soaps displayed among other crafts, her story reaching ears she had never imagined. She imagined other widows seeing her succeed and believing that they too could rise. For the first time in months, Amina felt the weight of grief lift slightly. She felt anticipation instead of sorrow, but the path was not without danger. Halfway to the fair, a sudden rainstorm turned the dirt roads to mud. Jabari struggled to keep the cart upright as water poured down from the forested hills. The soaps were at risk of being ruined, and every step forward became a battle. Amina rolled up her sleeves and helped push the cart, laughing despite the mud and cold. She encouraged the women traveling with her to keep faith. Hours passed in struggle, but by nightfall, they reached a small rest stop. Soaked and exhausted, Amina looked at the soaps, most of which had survived the storm. Relief washed over her, but she knew that the fair was only the beginning. As they prepared for the final leg of the journey, a shadow fell over the campsite. Figures approached silently from the trees. Amina's heart sank. Were these thieves or rivals from the village seeking revenge? The women huddled close, fear rising. Jabari whispered to stay calm, but Amina felt every muscle tense. She realized that this journey would test her courage in ways the village never had. She stepped forward, ready to face whatever threat emerged from the shadows, knowing that the strength she had forged in grief would guide her through this storm as well. Amina stepped forward into the dim light, her hands steady, despite the fear that rippled through the group. The figures in the trees emerged into the glow of the fire. They were not thieves, but travelers seeking shelter. Relief washed over her, yet the adrenaline left her exhausted. She welcomed them, offering blankets and a place near the fire. That night, as rain drummed on the roof of the rest stop, Amina reflected on how far she had come. Only months ago, grief had paralyzed her. Now, she guided women, protected her business, and faced the unknown with courage. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for Cato's memory and for the strength that had emerged from her sorrow. By the next morning, the roads were slick but passable. Amina led the small caravan toward the town center. The journey was arduous, and each hill and river crossing tested their resolve. But the thought of reaching the trade fair kept them moving. When they finally arrived, the town square was bustling. Stalls overflowed with colorful crafts, fragrant herbs, woven baskets, and exotic foods. Amina felt a pang of nervousness as she laid out her soaps, their bright colors and delicate scents filling the space. Traders and villagers alike began to gather. They marveled at the quality, the beauty, and the story behind each bar. Amina explained her process to curious onlookers, sharing her journey and emphasizing the role of the widows who worked beside her. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of lived experience. By midday, Amina's stall had attracted attention far beyond the fair. A wealthy merchant offered to purchase a large shipment for sale in the neighboring town. Officials from the district approached to praise her enterprise. One elder asked how a widow had managed to create such a thriving business in such a short time. Amina smiled, recounting her losses and the way grief had pushed her to find power within herself. The crowd listened in awe. Mothers turned to daughters, whispering encouragement. Young women who had doubted their abilities watched with hope. Amina realized that she was no longer simply selling soap. She was selling a message that loss could be transformed into strength, and that resilience could inspire a community. News of her success traveled quickly. When she returned to Luero, the village celebrated her accomplishments. Widows and young women gathered to learn, apprenticeships grew, and the House of Hope became a center for learning and collaboration. Even her relatives began to soften. Mama Jalia approached Amina one afternoon. Speaking quietly, she admitted that she had been wrong to oppose her and offered a truce. Amina accepted, not out of weakness, but to demonstrate the power of forgiveness. Strength, she realized, was not only in resistance, but in knowing when to release old grudges. Months passed, and Amina's soap-making enterprise flourished. She introduced new products, began exporting to towns farther afield, and provided steady income to dozens of widows. Children attended school with fees paid from sales. Families who had once struggled now had meals every evening. Amina had not only regained her dignity but had restored hope for others. The villagers marveled at how a single woman, who had once been defined by loss, had transformed grief into prosperity, respect, and inspiration. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, Amina stood on the veranda of her compound, watching the women and children laugh and work together. She remembered Cato's gentle smile and whispered, "We did this together." Her heart was full, yet she knew that challenges would always come. The world could be cruel, and success often drew envy. But she had learned that courage, determination, and compassion were stronger than fear. She had faced threats, storms, and betrayal, yet she had survived and flourished. Her legacy would be more than soap. It would be resilience. It would be hope. By nightfall, the village had grown quiet. Amina sat beside the drying soaps, the moonlight casting silver shadows across the compound. She thought of the first bar she had ever made, small and imperfect, and marveled at how far she had come. Each bar that now carried a fragrance of flowers and herbs also carried the memory of her grief and her triumph. She realized that true power came not from wealth or possession, but from the ability to rise after loss and to lift others along the way. As she prepared to close for the night, a messenger arrived from a distant district. He spoke of women in other regions who had heard of her work and wanted her guidance. Amina understood that her journey was far from over. Her grief had been the spark, her determination the fuel, and now the flame of her story burned bright enough to reach villages beyond her own. She smiled, knowing that what had begun as sorrow had grown into a force that could not be extinguished. And as the moon rose high over Luero, Amina held a final bar of soap, inhaling the scent of herbs and flowers, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." The House of Hope had become more than a home. It was a symbol, a testament to courage, resilience, and the power to transform grief into strength. A widow once thought weak had turned tragedy into triumph. She had taken the darkness of loss and molded it into light for herself, her children, and countless others who would follow in her footsteps. The village would tell her story for generations, a story of sorrow transformed into power, and of a woman who refused to be broken. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the fragrance of soaps and the promise of hope far beyond the hills of Luero. After losing her husband, young widow Amina faces relentless pressure from greedy relatives trying to take her property. Refusing to surrender, she starts a small soap-making business using the skills her late husband once cherished. Her courage, hard work, and innovation transform her grief into strength. As her business grows, she inspires other widows, earns respect from her village, and overcomes threats, jealousy, and misfortune. From tragedy emerges hope, dignity, and a thriving enterprise that changes lives. Amina's journey proves that resilience and determination can turn sorrow into lasting power.